Hey guys, James again with TFBTV. Welcome to Guns vs. Bears episode 2. You may remember a few months back I did Guns vs. Bears 1. Not so much talking about guns versus bears, but really talking about how to keep yourself safe when you're walking in bear country, and part of that discussion included firearms. And guys, like I said in the last video, I think bears are freaking awesome. I would never want to shoot one, but I also want to know what I would have to do to protect myself should a situation arise. And that's really what the purpose of video number 1 was, because I was researching it since Lindsay and I went to Katmai National Park and Denali National Park in Alaska over the 4th of July week. Now, the big deal with Katmai is you can have a genuine close encounter in nature with a grizzly bear and probably walk away unscathed. That's because Katmai is the site of the salmon run. 400,000 salmon swim in from the Pacific Ocean to traverse the Brooks River. At one point in the river, there's a 6-foot cascade known as Brooks Falls, and that's where the grizzlies, up to 1,500-pound coastal Alaskan grizzlies, congregate to catch salmon. It's an incredible experience, one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And it's neat because the grizzlies are more invested in the salmon, right? Kind of like when you went to a buffet when you were a kid. We had a Quincy's. Do you guys, anybody else have a Quincy's? Nobody's ever heard of Quincy's. The big fat yeast roll and all that. But we would go to Quincy's and you would have a big thing of macaroni and cheese and it would be next to the coleslaw, and it's a buffet, it's all you can eat. What are you gonna do? You're gonna get the coleslaw, especially when you're a kid? No, you're going straight for the mac and cheese, chicken nuggets, whatever. You're not gonna touch the coleslaw. So there we are, coleslaw human beings walking around while they're catching macaroni and cheese and chicken nugget salmon. Now that was a really obtuse analogy, but you guys get what I'm driving at. In fact, the rules are totally different in Katmai for dealing with bears versus every other park. For example, in Denali, they want you to be 300 yards away from a brown bear if you see one. In Katmai, you can be as close as 50 meters. This is within their regulations. You can be as close as 50 meters from a sow with cubs, which is virtually unheard of anywhere else in the entire world. But they're relatively accustomed to people, and again, they've got a buffet in front of them, so they're really not looking for alternative food sources, i.e. you. So if you remember the conclusion from Guns vs. Bears 1, the conclusion was that bear spray, based on all these studies, is statistically more effective at deterring bears than a firearm. But what happens when your bear spray fails, right? The only thing you have to fall back on is your firearm. So my conclusion was, I'm gonna carry this bear spray, try to deter an attacking bear, and if I ultimately have to, I wanna be able to carry a gun that can stop the fight. Talking about that, stopping the fight, my conclusion at the end of that video was that .44 Magnum was generally considered the minimum for a handgun if you're going to carry it for coastal Alaskan grizzlies that, again, grow well over 1,000 pounds. However, I've been doing more research since I made that video, and as this trip got closer and closer, and a lot of that research was driven by your, yes you, your comments to the last video. There were people in there saying, look, James, shot placement's what counts. Obviously, you're not going to be able to stop a bear by bleeding it out with a tiny handgun round. You need to disable the bear by shot to the brain, and you need to be able to get through that big, thick, grizzly skull. So there are people that were making a recommendation that I look at 10mm. Now remember, I had done all my research and I had settled on .44 Magnum, but I listened to you guys. I love the comments. I read almost all of them for every video. And a lot of people said, look at 10mm, look at even .357 Magnum, because you can still penetrate that bear skull and you need to get good shot placement. So I researched it and you guys were right. 10mm is considered an effective brown bear stopping round. Again, you have to rely on good shot placement, but if you use a hard cast lead bullet, guys, listen to me, very important, a hard cast lead bullet. You don't want to use a hollow point or just a regular lead ball round. It's not going to have as much penetration as a hard cast lead bullet. So I called Glock, it was really funny. I said, look, I want to try out a 10mm potentially to bring to Alaska. I'm going camping with these grizzlies. And they sent me the Glock 20, they sent me a shovel and a survival knife and said, good luck, you're an idiot. So what did I do? A couple of weeks before I went on the trip, I said, you know it'd be fun? Let me bring some of my buddies out to the range. We're gonna get that .44 Magnum. We're gonna get that Glock 20 SF using 220 grain 10mm, and we're gonna shoot those side by side. and maybe shooting them will help me decide which one I'm going to bring. And boy, did it ever, especially when I let my friends shoot it. Now, I love my Smith & Wesson Model 69. It's a 44 Magnum with about a 2.5 or 2 3/4 inch barrel, very lightweight, 5-shot 44 Magnum made for personal defense. But as you can imagine, that thing kicks like a mofo whenever you're shooting full house Magnum rounds through it. So look at this B-roll, all my buddies in slow-mo shooting the 44 Magnum. You can see, again, 44 Magnum, especially out of a small platform like that, it's a little dicey to shoot it and try to get shots on paper. You guys may remember in Bears versus Guns 1, I could hit a paper plate from the draw with the 44 Magnum, but I'm still not comfortable with it. And you have 5 rounds, you might be relying on volume of fire. If you're trying to make one specific shot, like the size of a baseball, you're trying to hit a moving, charging bear's brain, you might need faster follow-up shots if you want to get that fight-stopping shot in. So now look at everybody shooting the 10mm. The Glock 20 SF is remarkably tame in 10mm. Of course, I'm familiar with Glocks and the manual of arms, so for me it was an easy transition to go from what I usually carry, like a Glock 19 or a Glock 17, to the Glock 20 SF. I knew what I was doing, I was familiar with the trigger, much more accurate with the 20 SF than with the 44 Magnum, and as you can see here with all my friends, I let them shoot the 20 SF, and what I would do, because I'm a terrible friend and an awful person, is I would stuff these 220 grain rounds, the bear rounds, in with the regular ammo, and I would let my friends shoot them. And you would know, if you were observing, you would know when one of those bear rounds went off, because it was a lot louder and it would kick that casing across the range. It was pretty incredible. But it's funny because the shooter, about half the time I would ask them, I would say, which round was the bear round? And they would say, I don't know, or they'd take a guess, and they'd sometimes be wrong. Alan, which one was the bear round?
I guess the first one.
Only about half the time could they actually say, oh, you know what, that's the bear round. And that was only after they were listening for the concussion. You really couldn't feel the difference. So you guys can see where this is going. I ended up bringing the Glock 20 SF. I just felt more comfortable having a gun that I could shoot more accurately, more rapidly, better shot placement, and I had 15+1 rounds of 220 grain 10mm versus just 5 rounds of 44 Magnum. Again, we're talking about a shot placement game, so it seemed like that made more sense. It has enough power, even though it's only 2/3 as powerful as 44 Magnum, 10mm has enough power to stop the fight, but it's much more controllable, much more accurate, and much faster to fire. So does that mean that you have to either be in the big bore revolver camp or the small semi-auto camp? No, it really seems like both options are viable. In fact, I was on Buffalo Bore's website because they have actually a wealth of information about defending yourself with a firearm from grizzlies on their website. And there was an article about how somebody used hard cast lead rounds from a Smith & Wesson semi-auto, like a 3rd gen Smith & Wesson semi-auto, and put down like a 1,000-pound grizzly, because again, you're talking about shot placement, apparently. Fortunately, I didn't have to learn that lesson the hard way when I was up in Alaska. Yes, we had a couple of run-ins. I've got a picture of one of our closer encounters, but we did actually come face to face with a grizzly on the trail. And guys at Katmai, they really couldn't care less. They'll saunter on. I think we got off the trail, we said, hey bear, we're right here. And I don't even think we got looked at. He just kept walking down the road. And that's how all the bears were there. Gang, thanks as usual for watching this video. A very special thank you to Glock, especially you, Brandy, for letting me borrow this Glock 20 SF that I brought with me to Alaska, and for sending me the survival knife and shovel. Used the shovel to dig little pits to keep the beer cold, and would use the knife to pop them open. It was perfect. I want to say thank you to Blue Alpha Gear for being one of the best sponsors. They make the best tactical belts in the biz. I gotta say thank you to my dogs at Ventura Munitions. Now, they didn't have 10mm grizzly bear ammo, so I had to go somewhere else. Don't tell them that. But they are the best ammo manufacturer and retailer in the biz, and we used their 44 Magnum and 10mm whenever we were shooting the range session. Thanks to my buddies for showing up to that and helping me out. But again, most of all, thank you to you guys for watching these videos like you do every week. I really appreciate it. I love you. Support us on Patreon. Keep watching. I'll see you next week.